Hello everybody, so today I want to quickly look at how to create collisions with particles, with pops. And in order to do this, I'm going to very quickly put a network together. We've actually looked at some of this in previous lessons, so if I go over this part very quickly, don't worry, you can go back to the previous lessons and check how to do that in more detail. And then from there, we're going to look at how to create those collisions with other objects, with other pieces of geometry. So I'm in SOP level here, and I want to start by just creating a sphere. This sphere is going to be used in order to create like an emitter for the particles. So I'm going to change this to polygon, no particular reason why, and let's make this half the size. I think doesn't need to be so big. And I will also add a transform. Again, I could do this just directly in here in the center, but I often like to do it in a transform just so that I can see clearly what is happening in my network. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to go maybe 4, maybe a little bit more. Let's go 4.8. Yeah, okay, I think there is fine. And from here I'm going to add my pop network, I think. Yep. And let's add this into the pop network. Okay, already I can see some things happening. I can see some of the particles here, and as I'm going through the timeline, it's starting to fill up, which is what I would expect to happen. Okay, this is just going to be pretty quick here, so let's remove this. And I want to add a gravity. Again, all of this is covered in previous lessons. Okay, so there's the gravity. Let's see how that goes. There we go. Now we've got this kind of strobing effect here, which I really don't like. Now you may remember how to get rid of that, and the way to do that was to go into my pop source attributes. It says here use inherited velocity. I don't want that. I want set initial velocity. The variance, I want to remove 0 and 0 here, and now I should get a much more, there we go, now it looks a lot more randomized. The strobing is gone. Now remember, the variance just changes in this particular case the speed of the particles, right, which really helps you to be able to define a more random look. Okay, away from that, let me have a think what I want to do now. Okay, yeah, let's add a ground plane, I think. So let's do that, ground plane. Maybe we'll pop that here. I want to add a merge because I have to add that in. Remember, I can't, there's no input here, so I have to do the merge and then put that in there. Let's see if that's going well. I don't think so. It's going round the bottom. Of course it is. Why is that? Well, the reason is that in the merge here, remember, I need to change the effector relationship. I need to change this to mutual. Okay, and now it should hit that. There we go. Right, now it's not going underneath. Okay, and you can see that it's actually bouncing up a little bit there. All right, cool. So next part, I think we're pretty much done there. Okay, so let's take a look at adding some collisions into this. Okay, so let me go back here to collisions, and I want to this time, where is that? Oh, we're all the way up here. This time I want to create a box. You can add any piece of geometry here. I'm just adding a box because it's the easiest one to do. And let's go into my box, and I'm going to transform, I think. Again, alrighty, good-o. Happy days. And what shall I do now? Okay, maybe let's pop that there, and I want to go to, yeah, let's just move this up, I think, a little bit. Maybe here, and I will go to I'm really not thinking so well today. Let's close that down there. There we go. Let's make that a bit bigger. Yeah, maybe a little bit wider. I'm just fussing here now like an old man. Right. My grandfather used to do this. All right, let's turn this now. Rotate it a little bit. And so now I'm wanting the particles, the idea anyway, is that they come down, they bounce off this, they roll down, whatever, and then they'll go into the ground plane at the bottom, right? That's the plan. I'm going to add a null here, and I'll explain why I'm adding that null in a minute. If you don't know what a null does, it does absolutely nothing. There's nothing going to happen with this. It's just really a marker, and I'll explain why that is. I always put my nulls in capitals so that they will end up at the top of a list. Again, I will show you what that means in a minute. Let's put out box, I think, there. And I'm going to add it to the second input, which is can be used for collision static objects. Okay, I don't actually need this part here, but I'm going to do it just for my own clarity, and you'll see why. Okay, so now I've got all these parts. Let's go in here. Now I can see that I've got my my emitter here, but I don't have my collision, and the reason is I also need to add it to this pop network. So I've still got this, but of course nothing's colliding. So let me go into something called a static object. All right, this is quite an old node if I remember correctly, and I'm going to merge this in. Let me merge that in here. All right, I can switch those. I'll do it on here, and again I'll probably have some problems with that, so let me go into the mutual again there, just to make sure that it will actually collide with it. Next, subpath. This is the part where you will see my thinking. So here you see, remember the null that we had? Let me go back a minute. Remember I added this null here, and that is because at this point here, at this point here, I want to be able to connect that point to something else in my network. And this part is the pop network. So here I can put my subpath in there. Let's hit this little button here to connect it, and you can see why I put it in capitals. Now in capitals it goes at the top of the list. If I didn't, it would have been further down the list in alphabetical order, but because I put it in capitals, it pops it at the top there, so it's easy to find. That's basically why. So I would recommend, if you're adding nulls as like points of reference, I would always put those in capitals. All right, so let's click on that, accept. Hey, hello, we're here, right? And let's see if we're getting any joy with that yet. There we go, it's colliding. Now, there's a few things I don't like about this here. First of all is this part here. Why is it not rolling around? Remember from previous lessons, if I go into here, go into physical, I'm going to remove my friction. I think I'll also remove the bounce. Let's see what happens there. All right, that looks cool. It's just rolling along. Yeah, I kind of like that. All right, it's kind of a bit of an effect here. Probably coming from this part here. Let me see what's going on here. So you've noticed a couple of things. First of all, it's bouncing on the collision object, and then it doesn't bounce at all on the floor. And the reason is because I can control these with two separate nodes. So the ground floor, I've now got my bounce as 0, but my static object has a bounce of 0.5. So if I want to remove that on there too, on the collision object, I make that 0, and now it's gone. Why is it doing that though? It's not going anywhere. My friction again, let's reduce the friction, and now it's all running off. There we go. Cool, huh? Alright, now there's just a little thing going on here which I'm not going to discuss now. You can see it's kind of not quite on top of the object, but that's for another lesson. But that's basically how that works. Now I can add numerous objects in here, so if I go back here and I want to add for it to bounce over a sphere and then a tube or whatever, I can just add these here and then I can merge them all together. I personally would probably merge them all before the null. Reason being that if I've added the null as the static object, then I'm going to be in trouble. When I add something after that, it won't be recognized. Okay, so I will probably put the null at the very end when I've merged all of the other objects together. Another alternative is that I add a different null for each one, and then I can add separate static objects, of course. If anybody needs me to show how to do that, I can, but I'm hoping that's a bit self-explanatory. I don't want to run this lesson on for too long. I try to keep these lessons as short as I can. So good luck, guys. Any questions, just let me know, and yeah, you guys have a great evening.